Now to Vice President Kamala Harris, who yesterday addressed virtually the Generation Equality Forum in Paris.
If we want to strengthen democracy, we must fight for gender equality. Because here's the truth. Democracy is strongest when everyone participates, and it is weaker when people are left out, when women are heard. When women are heard, whether that is in the courtroom, in the workplace, in the halls of government, or at the ballot box, democracy is more complete. Remember to use the tools of democracy, whether that is the freedom of speech or the freedom to vote. And if you do not yet have those freedoms, fight for them. And know we will fight alongside you.
Joining us now, founder and CEO of All In Together, Lauren Leader, who writes about the Vice President's address for The Hill. Also with us, the Chief Executive of the Time's Up Foundation, Tina Chen. She's also former Chief of Staff to former First Lady Michelle Obama and ran the White House Council on Women and Girls as well. Lauren, I want to start with you in terms of if you could frame for us the magnitude or what potentially this speech could mean for Kamala Harris's vice presidency.
Well, it was certainly an important moment on the world stage, really in some ways her most significant speech on the world stage. The president of France, the president of Mexico both spoke right before her. And it is 26 years since Hillary Clinton famously in Beijing at the last major World Forum on Women's Issues said the famous words, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights once and for all, which was transformative and led to this incredible collaboration between 189 countries around the world who made significant commitments to advancing gender equity. And so this, as the follow-up to that, to have the first woman, Black, Asian, American vice president speaking at this forum was significant and really an important moment for her to establish her presence on the world stage.
Tina Chen, explain, if you could, because I've tried on this show, Joe Biden's commitment to not just pay equality, but gender equality and representation. This White House has more women working in it. This is something he's been pretty dedicated to. And what is it that you think the vice president needs to do in her position to continue with some of the goals that were initially set out by the White House Council of Women and Girls, put together by President Obama and you, but then gotten rid of by Donald Trump?
Well, one of the first things they did was reinstitute that effort with the Gender Policy Council and really expand the charge for a highly placed group of folks at the center of government in the White House to direct gender policy, both international and domestic, across all of the federal government, led by Julius Reynoso and Jen Klein. So, that was step one, which has been terrific. They're working directly with the Vice President's office. Her speech this week just pulled it all together. It was accompanied, Mika, by a lengthy issuance of commitments by the U.S. government to the international stage as part of the Generation Equality Forum of what we're doing, including, as you talked about with Yamiche, the nearly $2 trillion investment in caregiving and paid leave, the things we're going to do to promote economic security for women here in the United States, plus commitments on combating gender-based violence around the world, committing to reproductive health and health care for women internationally and domestically. So I'm really pleased because the Biden administration has really put a robust agenda on the table and are pursuing it vigorously to promote gender equity across the board.
So we're going to talk more about that in just a second. But first, Elise Jordan, you have a question.
Lauren, you wrote and forecasted about the speech very well for The Hill, and I'd encourage everyone to read that. But then the actual remarks, it did seem more about democracy promotion almost than about promoting women's rights. And there was such an opportunity there for Vice President Harris to follow up on what then First Lady Hillary Clinton announced in her historic speech that is just one of the top speeches of all time. What do you make of the actual remarks?
Yeah, it was a really tough line for them to walk. She was only given 5 minutes, and it's hard to put a lot in 5 minutes. And Tina's right, they put out this extraordinary list of commitments following her speech. And so I think it was hard to sort of capture the full breadth of what their commitments are in the speech. I was fascinated that they focused on democracy because we really haven't seen that, obviously, in recent years for all the obvious reasons. But it is true that around the world, the participation of women in democratic institutions is a stabilizing force. It enables countries to establish healthy and vibrant democracies. We saw that in Afghanistan. We saw that in Iraq. We've seen that all the way around the world. And I thought it was a fascinating choice that rather than just exclusively focus on women's rights per se, to focus on the larger picture of the importance of women's participation. And it surprised me. It was not what I was expecting from this speech, but I think it does signal a real commitment from the Biden administration to these issues, not just at home, where clearly there are some very significant issues that need to be addressed. As Tina said, the White House is doing, I think, yeoman's work in trying to address some of the regressive policies of the last few years and catch up for the work that hasn't been done. But to make this commitment globally and to focus on women as the anchors of democracy, I thought was really, really interesting from this administration.
So, Tina, your organization is really, really focused on getting the families plan where it needs to go. And I agree with it. I think it would be just earth-changing for the women of America as they look for an equal place in society. What are some of the stumbling blocks, though, to that getting passed?
Well, we've got our Republican, lawmakers in Congress who don't think it's important, or trying to say it's not real infrastructure building. And yet we know that a majority of voters. Well, it's critical. Look, you can't go, you can't leave your house to drive over that road or bridge. They're concerned about repairing to get to a job if you don't have caregiving at home already to take care of your loved ones, your children, your sick elderly. For too long, American women have been left out of this. We are behind the rest of the world. Since we're talking about a global forum, let's get real. We're one of only 2 countries in the world without a national paid leave policy. President Biden's put a national paid leave policy on the table now, and we need to fund it or else we are going to get left behind. This is a question of, are women going to be included in this economy going forward with the investments that the government makes, or are women going to get left behind? And if caregiving is out of the proposals, we are getting left behind. We already know that over 2 million women have left the workforce in the last year. And it's largely because of caregiving, the demands at home. And we cannot afford to have that continue.
I mean, really, the pandemic showed the difference between men and women and what makes it possible for them to keep their jobs and what does not. I mean, if the pandemic did not prove that caregiving is the huge #1 issue that keeps them from being able to be a part of professional society, I don't know what it is. Tina Chen and Lauren Leader, thank you both very much for being on the show this morning. Coming up, our next